Hello everyone. Welcome back to Mystery Media. Find a comfortable place to sit, take a slow breath, and let the story begin. Picture a man sitting alone at a piano, his fingers moving across the keys with extraordinary precision. Precision means exactness and accuracy in every movement. The music filling the room around him, powerful, emotional, alive. But the man cannot hear a single note, not one. He presses his ear against the wood of the piano. He saws the legs off so it sits lower on the floor. He cuts a piece of wood and holds it between his teeth, pressing the other end against the instrument, trying to feel the vibrations. Vibrations means small, rapid movements that produce sound through his jaw. Trying to feel in his bones what his ears can no longer give him. This man has already written music that made emperors weep, music that filled the greatest concert halls in Europe, music that 200 years later is still performed every single day somewhere on this earth, and he cannot hear any of it. His name is Ludwig van Beethoven, and his story is not just about music. It is about what a human being can create when everything that should make creation impossible has already been taken away. Welcome to Mystery Media. Real history. Real stories, told in clear, natural English. Whether you love history or you are building your English, this is your place. Take a comfortable breath, and let us begin. Ludwig van Beethoven was baptized on December 17, 1770, in the city of Bonn. His grandfather, also named Ludwig, had been the most respected musician at the court of Cologne. A proud and distinguished man, a source of deep pride for young Beethoven. But his father was a different story entirely. His childhood was dominated by his father, a tough taskmaster and an alcoholic. He would come home drunk, drag the young Beethoven out of bed and make him play the piano. A small boy, dragged from sleep in the middle of the night, forced to perform for a drunk man who called himself his teacher. Neighbors have described the young child weeping as he played the clavier by standing atop a footstool to get to the keys, his father slapping him on the back after every significant error or hesitation. Beethoven was flogged and kept in the cellar almost every day, and he was deprived of sleep for exterior practicing hours. Flogged means beaten repeatedly as a punishment. Kept in a cellar is a dark underground room beneath a building. Deprived of sleep. This was not music education. This was abuse. Abuse means cruel and violent treatment of someone. Beethoven's father planned his first public presentation for March 26, 1778, in the hopes that their young son would be recognized as a musical genius, a la Wolfgang Mozart. Beethoven, who was billed as a young son of 6 years, despite the fact that he was 7, performed the piece admirably, but his recital received little press. His father lied about his age, trying to make him seem more impressive. A more marketable means able to attract attention and commercial interest, child prodigy. But here is what is remarkable. Despite all of this, at age 12, Beethoven was allegedly a master theorist and keyboardist, able to play his way through almost all of Bach's monumental work, the well-tempered clavier. Key vocabulary: resilience. Resilience means the ability to recover from difficult situations and continue despite great hardship. Beaten, humiliated, dragged from sleep, and still somehow becoming one of the greatest musicians who had ever lived. His paternal grandmother, Josepha, and his father, Johann van Beethoven, suffered from alcohol use disorder, which led to his father's death when Ludwig was 21 years old. Complications from tuberculosis claimed the lives of his mother, Maria Magdalena Keverich, and his younger brother, Caspar Anton Karl. His mother, his brother, gone, his father drinking himself toward his own death. As his father declined, Beethoven took over the role of wage earner and caretaker of the family. He was still a teenager, now responsible for keeping his family alive, playing music for money, not for art, for survival. After his wife died, the father would sometimes be found in the gutter, and his children had to persuade the police not to arrest him. Key phrase: carrying the weight of the world. Carrying the weight of the world means being responsible for things far beyond what one person should have to bear. Ludwig van Beethoven was carrying the weight of the world before he was even 20 years old. In 1792, everything changed. When he finally returned to the city in 1792, Beethoven was able to take lessons with no less a composer than Franz Joseph Haydn. Haydn, one of the most respected composers in all of Europe, teaching this rough, unglamorous means not attractive or impressive in appearance, young man from Bonn. It was in Vienna that Beethoven would enjoy some of his greatest successes, kicked off perhaps with his premiere performance as both pianist and composer in 1795, and the debut of his Symphony No. 1 in C major in 1800. Vienna loved him. Audiences were stunned. Stunned means so shocked or impressed they could not react immediately by his playing. His improvisation means creating music spontaneously, without preparation. At the piano was said to be unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed. He was bold. Unconventional means not following what is traditionally accepted, doing things differently. Sometimes rude to the aristocrats means members of the highest social class, usually born into wealth and title, who paid for his performances. He would stop playing mid-concert if the audience was too noisy. He would walk out of rooms when people talked over his music. Key vocabulary: eccentric. Eccentric means unusual or unconventional in behavior or appearance. Beethoven was eccentric from the beginning, difficult, brilliant, impossible to ignore. Ludwig van Beethoven was an often unpleasant and always unhappy man, notoriously unkempt and suffering from chronic diarrhea, liver disease, and depression. He lived in squalor, was once observed keeping an unemptied chamber pot under his piano. He was paranoid, certain everyone was cheating him, and he failed at most relationship. An unemptied chamber pot under his piano. The man who wrote music that made emperors weep, living in conditions that shocked even his closest friends. And yet, from that chaos means complete disorder and confusion, came music of extraordinary beauty. Around 1798, something began happening to Ludwig van Beethoven that terrified him more than anything else in his life. At the same time as Beethoven was composing some of his most immortal works, he was struggling to come to terms with a shocking and terrible fact, one that he tried desperately to conceal. He was going deaf. Beethoven described a 3-year history of progressive bilateral hearing loss to high-frequency sounds, such as those produced by the violin, piccolo, and piano that initially began in the left ear. The hearing loss was associated with unbearable tinnitus. Tinnitus means a persistent ringing or buzzing sound inside the ears that never stops. Imagine that. A composer, hearing a constant ringing inside his own head, unable to silence it. Beethoven revealed in a heart-wrenching 1801 letter to his friend Franz Wegeler, "I must confess that I lead a miserable life. For almost 2 years I have ceased to attend any social functions, just because I find it impossible to say to people, 'I am deaf.' If I had any other profession, I might be able to cope with my infirmity, but in my profession it is a terrible handicap." He hid it for years. He avoided public gatherings. He avoided conversations. He smiled and nodded when people spoke, pretending to hear words he could not make out, because telling the truth meant admitting that the one thing that defined him was being taken away. Key vocabulary: concealed. Concealed means deliberately hidden from others. Beethoven concealed his deafness the way other people conceal their deepest fears, because for him it was exactly that. In April 1802, Beethoven left Vienna. He moved to a small village called Heiligenstadt just outside the city, alone, to come to terms with what was happening to him. There he wrote the document now known as the Heiligenstadt Testament, a letter to his brothers that records his thoughts of suicide due to his growing deafness and his resolution to continue living for and through his art. The letter was never sent and was discovered in his papers after his death. In it, he wrote, "O you men who think or say that I am malevolent, stubborn, or misanthropic, how greatly do you wrong me! You do not know the secret cause which makes me seem that way to you, and I would have ended my life. It was only my art that held me back. It was only my art that held me back. The music, not hope, not friendship, not love. The music, the one thing the world was in the process of taking from him, was the only reason he chose to stay alive." The letters to Wegeler and Amenda were not so despairing. In them, Beethoven commented on his ongoing professional and financial success at this period, and his determination, as he expressed it to Wegeler, to seize fate by the throat. "It shall certainly not crush me completely." Seize fate by the throat. Seize means to grab something suddenly and forcefully. Key phrase, seize fate by the throat. This expression means to take control of your destiny with great determination, refusing to let circumstances defeat you. This was not a man giving up. This was a man standing at the edge of his own destruction, choosing to fight. Beethoven returned from Heiligenstadt changed, determined, and more productive. A productive means achieving a great deal, creating a lot than ever before. Beethoven's return to Vienna from Heiligenstadt was marked by a change in musical style, and is now often designated as the start of his middle or heroic period, characterized by many original works composed on a grand scale. According to Czerny, Beethoven said, "I am not satisfied with the work I have done so far. From now on I intend to take a new way." A new way. From 1802 to 1812, he composed 5 sets of piano variations, 7 piano sonatas, 6 symphonies, 4 solo concerti, 4 overtures, 4 trios, 5 string quartets, 6 string sonatas, 2 sextets, 1 opera, and 72 songs. Read that list again. An almost impossible volume of work, created by a man steadily going deaf. Between 1805 and 1811, Beethoven composed some of his greatest works, including 3 symphonies as well as piano concertos, overtures, and quartets. He was able to hear the music in his head and improvised on piano even when he could not hear it. He heard it in his mind, not in the room, not through his ears, but through some extraordinary internal architecture. Internal architecture here means the complex inner structure of thought and imagination, of musical imagination that deafness could not reach. Key vocabulary, transcend. Transcend means to go beyond the normal limits of something, to rise above ordinary experience. Beethoven transcended deafness, not by overcoming it, but by refusing to let it be the final word. But behind all of this brilliance, there was a private wound. A wound here means a deep emotional hurt that never fully healed. Beethoven never married. He fell in love deeply, repeatedly, with women who were almost always unavailable to him. After his death, a letter was discovered, unsent, like the Heiligenstadt Testament, written in 1812, addressed simply to his Immortal Beloved. In it he wrote, "Your love has made me one of the happiest and at the same time one of the unhappiest of men." Historians have debated for 2 centuries. Centuries means periods of 100 years who this woman was. Anthony Brentano, a married woman he knew in Vienna, is the most widely accepted candidate. Candidate means a person considered for a particular role or position. But nobody knows for certain. The letter was never sent. She never read it. Key vocabulary, unrequited. Unrequited means not returned. Unrequited love means loving someone who cannot fully love you back. The greatest composer who ever lived could not find or hold the love he wrote about so privately and so painfully. In 1815, Beethoven's brother Caspar died, and what followed revealed the most troubling means causing worry or concern side of Beethoven's character. Beethoven was several years into a legal and psychological battle with his late brother Caspar's wife over the care and custody of his young nephew, Karl. Beethoven fought obsessively to win custody of his nephew Karl. He took the case to court repeatedly. He spent enormous amounts of money on legal fees. He wrote letters accusing Karl's mother of every conceivable wrongdoing. He eventually won custody, but what happened next was deeply painful. The endless litigation, combined with the composer's reportedly strict and volatile behavior toward the young man, may have contributed to Karl's attempted suicide in 1826, an act which appears to highlight a pattern of abuse passed down from Beethoven's father. A pattern of abuse passed down from Beethoven's father. The man who was beaten as a child, dragged from his bed at night, flogged for wrong notes, had become, in his own way, to the person he loved most. Something uncomfortably similar to what his father had been to him. Key vocabulary: cycle. A cycle means a series of events that repeat themselves in the same order. The cycle of damage that began with Beethoven's father continued into the next generation, despite every intention otherwise. By 1819, Beethoven was completely deaf. Although his deafness did not become total until 1819, the first symptoms of the impairment manifested before 1800. Beethoven's final 8 years were silent. From age 48 to 56, he resorted to keeping conversation books to communicate with others. Conversation books. A conversation books means notebooks where people wrote questions and comments for Beethoven to read, since he could no longer hear them speak. He could not hear speech, he could not hear music, he could not hear the world, and in this absolute silence, he wrote his Ninth Symphony. It's likely that Beethoven never heard a single note of his magnum opus, Symphony No. 9 in D minor, played. The Ninth Symphony contains the famous final movement, the Ode to Joy, one of the most recognized pieces of music in human history, performed at Olympic Games. Adopted as the anthem, anthem means an official song representing a group or cause of the European Union, sung by hundreds of millions of people across the world for 200 years, and the man who wrote it never heard it, not once. During the premiere of his final masterpiece, Beethoven had to be turned around to view the clapping of the audience as he had become completely deaf by then. Standing before the audience, back to the crowd, still conducting, moving his arms to music playing in his memory rather than his ears, and someone had to physically turn him around so he could see with his eyes the ovation. Ovation means enthusiastic applause. A standing ovation means the audience stands to applaud he could not hear. There is no image in all of music history more heartbreaking or more extraordinary. Key phrase: rising above. Rising above means achieving something remarkable despite great difficulties. Beethoven did not just rise above his deafness. He rose above it so completely that the music he wrote in total silence has outlasted everything that tried to silence him. In his final years, Beethoven's health collapsed. His illnesses include his well-known deafness, as well as a period of what he called inflammatory fever, liver problems likely in part due to alcohol, jaundice, fever, and other serious symptoms. Like his father and paternal grandmother, Ludwig was a drinker, with important periods of alcohol consumption that began intermittently when he was 17 years old, particularly during his periods of depression. His favorite drink was Hungarian wine, which at that time was of poor quality and tainted with lead to improve its aroma and flavor. wine laced with lead, the same lead that may have contributed to his deafness. Deafness means the condition of being unable to hear was in his wine glass. He was drinking the very thing that was slowly destroying him, without knowing it. Beethoven died in 1827 from complications due to pneumonia and possible lead poisoning. In his final days, during a dramatic thunderstorm, Beethoven reportedly raised his fist toward the sky, then fell back, and was gone. He died on March 26, 1827. He was 56 years old. There is one final detail that belongs to the story of his death, a detail that is almost too perfect, too symbolic to be believed. The letter was never sent and was discovered in his papers after his death. The Heiligenstadt Testament, the letter where he had confessed his suicidal thoughts, his plan to end his life, his decision instead to live for the music. Nobody knew it existed until he was gone. He had kept it secret for 25 years, hidden inside the desk of a man who gave the whole world his music, while keeping his darkest confession to himself. Ludwig van Beethoven composed 9 symphonies, 32 piano sonatas, 5 piano concertos, 16 string quartets, 1 opera, and hundreds of other pieces. Beethoven was an innovator of musical form. He widened the scope of the symphony, the sonata, the concerto, and the quartet, and in so doing broke many patterns of classical music. The essence of Beethoven is more. He took the past and did everything more contrast, more intensity, longer pieces. He used Haydn and Mozart's forms but made more out of the development, more out of the coda, and the orchestra got bigger. More. That is the word. More contrast, more intensity, more depth, more humanity. Despite Beethoven's personal unhappiness, he put joy and consolation into his music with endless generosity. Key vocabulary: consolation. Consolation means comfort received after loss or suffering. A man who lived in squalor, who could not sustain means to keep going, to maintain something over time, relationships. Who passed a cycle of damage onto the nephew he claimed to love. Who drank wine laced with the poison that destroyed his hearing, and still put joy and consolation into his music with endless generosity. That is the full picture of Ludwig van Beethoven. Not a saint, not a simple hero, a deeply flawed, deeply suffering, deeply human being, who somehow reached past all of it to create something the world could not live without. Key phrase: the full picture. The full picture means the complete and honest truth about something, including the uncomfortable parts. History remembers Beethoven as a musical god. Biomystery media remembers him as something far more extraordinary. A man who went deaf and wrote the greatest music. 5 keywords from today's story. Resilience, the ability to recover from difficult situations and continue despite hardship. Beethoven's resilience in the face of abuse and deafness is almost beyond comprehension. Concealed, deliberately hidden from others. He concealed his deafness for years because he feared what it would mean. Transcend, to go beyond the normal limits of something. He transcended deafness by finding music inside the silence. Unrequited, not returned. Loving someone who cannot love you back fully. His letter to the Immortal Beloved reveals a lifetime of unrequited longing. Consolation, comfort received after loss or suffering. Despite his personal unhappiness, he put consolation into his music with endless generosity. If today's story moved you, if you heard Beethoven's music differently by the end of it, leave a comment below and tell me which moment stayed with you most. Was it the boy dragged from his bed at night, the letter he never sent, found only after his death, or the man who had to be turned around on stage so he could see the applause he would never hear? Subscribe to Bio Mystery Media. Every week we tell the real story, the full story, the human story behind the legend. in clear natural English for history lovers and B1 and B2 English learners everywhere. Next week on Bio Mystery Media. A man so brilliant the world stole everything he invented. So forgotten that he died alone in a hotel room surrounded by pigeons. His name was Nikola Tesla, and his story is already waiting for you. Take good care of yourself, and we will see you in the next story.